Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where a new poll shows the president struggling on key issues as the White House grapples with its messaging on affordability as a looming health care premium spike threatens to magnify the issue for millions of Americans. And it all comes as the president was dealt a major rebuke by members of his own party, complicating Republicans' efforts to hold the House in next year's midterms. But we do begin with Republicans' health care dilemma. After dueling bills failed in the Senate yesterday, attention now turns to the House. Speaker Johnson says he's expecting a vote on health care next week, telling reporters earlier today that, quote, final details of a Republican plan are in the works.
We had a very productive meeting just now with lots of leaders from across the conference. Everybody is coming together on the final plan. We're still working on the final details of it. There were some great ideas put on the table just now. This is going to be a great piece of legislation that everybody will unite around, so stay tuned for the details.
You're planning on announcing it today? Yeah.
I don't think we'll probably announce the final details today, but you can look forward to that probably coming together over the weekend.
But that Republican House plan is not expected to include an extension of the expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies, in contrast to two Republican-led bills that have already been introduced and have Democratic co-sponsors. Today, Minority Leader Jeffries saying Democratic leadership could be open to those bipartisan plans, which would likely give them enough support to be brought for a vote.
We're actively reviewing those two discharge petitions, and we'll have more to say about it early next week. But what is clear, time is running out. Where were these Republican ideas over the last several months? We're going to evaluate every single good faith proposal, but it has to meaningfully provide certainty to the American people who are at risk of having their health care ripped away from them.
Last night, President Trump expressed optimism that both parties could work together.
We have a lot of Democrats, and we welcome you. Honestly, we do. And I think we're going to start working together on health care. I really predict that. We make beautiful, big payments directly to the people, and they buy their own health insurance. And it's so good and so popular, and everybody wants it. And I think, frankly, a lot of the Democrats are going to want it, too.
But President Trump has been noticeably absent from any discussions or negotiations on health care. According to a new Associated Press poll, only 29% of Americans approve of his handling of health care. His handling of the economy is at similarly dire at 31%, his lowest ever in that poll. And across the board, most Americans giving the president low marks on key issues. Border security, though, is the only issue where his approval is above 50%. The president this week defended his administration's record on affordability and argued costs have come down in his second term. Take a listen.
Prices are coming down very substantially, but they have a new word. You know, they always have a hoax. The new word is affordability, but they use the word affordability, and that's their only word. They say affordability, and everyone says, oh, that must mean Trump has high prices. No, our prices are coming down tremendously from the highest prices in the history of our country.
But despite what the president says, large majorities of Americans say they're experiencing higher prices than usual on groceries, electricity, and holiday gifts this December. Joining me now from the White House is NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, and Mel Zenona is on Capitol Hill for us. Yamiche, let me start with you at the White House. The president saying last night he thinks they can work with Democrats on a health care deal. Are you getting any sense that that can actually happen? What are your sources telling you?
Kristen, my sources are telling me that anything is possible, but that it's not likely. Let's remember that the president, during the shutdown, that longest shutdown in U.S. history, that the president at one point was talking to the Democrats about subsidies, but that went nowhere. What we know is that the president over and over again has blamed Democrats for these subsidies that are likely going to hit millions and millions of Americans. So the president here is really just saying that he's going to work with Republicans and try to come up with some sort of plan. But when the White House press secretary was pressed yesterday on what that plan could would look like, what the details could be. She did not give any sort of information about that. So I think it's still very, very unlikely that the president has some sort of negotiation with Democrats that would allow them to come to some sort of deal on this. All that being said, anything is possible. President Trump, when he was running in 2016, sounded in some ways like a Democrat. He was talking about Medicare for all and wanting to lower health care costs, but he's also very, very, I think, sensitive to the idea that he doesn't want to be blamed once these subsidies do expire and once people's health care costs go up, Kristen.
Yeah, and the president talking about giving money directly to the people, something that many Democrats have said is dead on arrival, Yamiche. So yesterday, Yamiche, I spoke with Congresswoman Malliotakis. She urged the White House not to listen to party leadership on this. She, of course, is a part of a bipartisan proposal on health care. Is there any concern in the administration that a failure to extend these subsidies could, in fact, cost Republicans in the midterms?
In talking to sources here, I get a sense of that there might be some trepidation to the fact that they are going to have to wrestle this messaging down and have to really try to make sure that they make people believe and convince Americans that this is Democrats' fault. And when you talk to the president and hear the president talk about this, he says this is all because the Affordable Care Act was a bad idea from the get-go, and that these subsidies could have been made permanent, but it was Democrats who made them be able to expire in this way. That being said, you have heard this White House talk about the fact that they are trying to come up with a plan. Let's remember, it's been a decade of the president saying he was going to come up with a plan. So the fact that this seems to be getting closer tells me that there is some sort of worry here that when as Americans see those prices go up, with people saying even double digits or even in some cases doubling their cost of health care, that they're worried about that and want to at least point to something that they could do. But again, all of this seems very much like just a messaging war with any actual details here, Kristen.
Well, and Yamiche, before I let you go, we talked about some of those tough poll numbers that the president's gotten. His job approval rating, according to this latest poll, 36% approve, Yamiche, 61% disapprove. What is the White House saying? Are folks there worried?
The president has said over and over again that he's not worried about polling. He's not worried about his numbers. Whether or not that's actually true, I think is something that's going to be interesting to see. We know that the president has done now a series of interviews. And of course, he had that speech in Pennsylvania talking about the economy and affordability. So you can tell that the president is trying his best to sort of turn this messaging and to try to convince Americans that he's worried about lowering costs. And I think that, of course, is tied to his approval ratings and the fact that, of course, he was elected on the promise that he was going to lower costs for all Americans, Kristen.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor at the White House starting us off. Yamiche, thank you so much. Mel, let me head over to you on Capitol Hill. So we heard Leader Jeffries say they're reviewing the bipartisan proposals that have been introduced on extending these health care subsidies. Is there any real momentum, though, on the House side? Because we saw what happened in the Senate yesterday. Everything was voted down.
Well, it really depends on what Jeffries' position is, because if he does throw his weight behind either of those bipartisan proposals, it would essentially open the floodgates for Democratic support. And because we already have the requisite number of Republicans supporting it, it would be enough to trigger a so-called discharge petition. So Jeffries has a really big decision here. That being said, the discharge petition, it takes time. So even if that were to succeed at some point next week, it would still take 7 legislative days, meaning the vote probably wouldn't happen until the new year, after these Obamacare subsidies already expire. And also, to your point, we already have seen that nothing, at least at this moment, can get 60 votes in the Senate. So that is really the key question right now, and why a lot of lawmakers in both parties are calling on President Trump to get involved and cut a real deal.
Well, Mel, Speaker Johnson is teasing a Republican plan. We haven't seen the details yet. Look, it's worth noting that I interviewed Secretary Scott Bessent several weeks ago. He said President Trump was going to be rolling out a plan. We haven't seen that yet. Are you getting any details about what this plan is going to be that Speaker Johnson has been teasing?
Well, we do expect that the House Republicans will release a plan. There's been multiple leadership meetings, including just this morning. It's probably going to be a package of health care proposals, a bunch of conservative health care ideas, from health savings accounts to cost-sharing reduction plans. It is not expected to include an extension of the ACA subsidies. However, that being said, there is discussion right now amongst the GOP leadership of allowing an amendment vote on extending the ACA subsidies during the debate on that health care bill that they're planning on rolling out. And that really says to me that Johnson recognizes that there is a huge political consequence for his moderate members, and they need some sort of political cover. And really, those members are the ones that are going to determine whether or not Republicans keep the majority next year.
So to that point, Mel, in the Senate yesterday, 2 proposals failed. However, 4 Republicans did vote for the Democratic bill. Is that an indication that maybe there could be some common ground here?
Well, I also think it's interesting who of those Republicans actually voted for the bill. 2 of them are from Alaska. Alaska has higher cost of living than most states, and also they are set to face the highest premium spikes, some of the highest premium spikes in the entire country if these Obamacare subsidies do lapse. And meanwhile, then you have Susan Collins. She's another Republican from Maine, a purple battleground state. She's up for re-election next year in 2026. And so clearly this is going to be a defining issue in the midterms, and why you have more and more Republicans, especially in competitive districts, starting to speak out. Kristen.
All right, Mel, thank you so much. Joining me now is the panel, Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter at Notice, Joe Crowley, former Democratic congressman from New York, and Malik Abdul, Republican strategist. Thanks to all of you for being here. Daniela, this is... Boy, it's hard to know how this is going to end. I talked to one White House official who said, don't rule out the possibility of an 11th hour deal. You heard President Trump express confidence. How do you see this coming together?
That's the question that we've had on our minds since this even started before the shutdown, when Democrats were making this a major issue. Look, I've talked to a lot of experts, healthcare experts, who are telling me that regardless of what the House could do next week with the pressure from moderate Republicans, from Democrats on something on the Affordable Care Act subsidies, addressing health care before the end of the year is going to be a mess. The Americans are going to see premiums skyrocket. It's going to be really hard to message back from that, even if there are changes, even if there's income caps, if there's reforms, if they do get these tax credits back in their pockets. This is regardless going to be a major issue going into next year, which is what I've been covering, Kristen, because this is not going away anytime soon.
Well, and it's clear Speaker Johnson is aware of that. Malik, let me play a little bit of what he had to say and get your reaction on the other side.
Next week, we'll be bringing a package of legislation to the floor that will bring down the cost of health care for all Americans, not just 7% of them, which is what the subsidy is all about.
So, Malik, what do you make of that? And if Republicans propose something that doesn't actually extend the subsidies, is that politically problematic, even if there's an amendment introduced?
So I think that if the amendment probably gives them cover, Donald Trump has typically been to the left of the Republican Party on the issue of health care. You remember in 1.0, he was really focused on protecting pre-existing conditions. So this has always been his position, but the House caucus, the Republicans, have been just get rid of everything. And we've heard them over and over again, repeal and replace, and then they haven't gotten anything to actually replace it. So I think it's an acknowledgement from Johnson that they need to do something, because these health care premiums, that will be on the ballot during the midterms, whether it's in the primary or even in the general election. So I do think that it was acknowledgement. Whether or not it'll ultimately pass, I don't know, but it absolutely has to.
Congressman, how do you see this playing out, this battle now moving to the House? Do you think that if Speaker Johnson puts the Republican plan on the floor, do you think that that's something that some Democrats will get behind if, for example, it doesn't initially include an extension of the ACA tax credits?
Well, they're talking about a 2-year extension within the Republican front line. Those who are maybe possibly, looking to have a discharge petition. But I don't think there's really going to be an opportunity for cover. I think they can take a vote on an amendment and say, well, I voted for a 2-year extension, but when those premiums hit, those premiums are going to hit. I was kind of skeptical about whether this was going to be an issue for Democrats to run on in 2026. I'm coming around to thinking that this might be a much stronger issue than I initially thought it was going to be. I actually thought they'd find a solution between now and the end of the year. And since that doesn't look like that's going to happen, and if it does, it looks like it's going to happen after the premiums go up. So people are going to see that cost increase. And the president's answer is to give them a one-time shot money, to pay for it, but it won't cover the cost for the whole year. So I think therein lies the real problem for Republicans. They don't have a plan. They've criticized the Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act for 15 years, and they said they can replace it, but they've never replaced it.
Daniela, what's so notable about this moment, we've heard President Trump make comments like the one he just made. He hasn't really been a part of the conversation, though.
No, he hasn't. And that's why we're seeing Speaker Mike Johnson lose the power from his own rank and file. We're seeing so many discharge petitions. This is basically rank and file members taking control of the floor and forcing votes on things. This is a major thing. It's supposed to be Republican leadership setting the floor. Congressman knows that. This is unprecedented, and it has to be noted that this is a sign of what's to come when, the conference, he doesn't have a grasp of it.
Yeah.
And you very rarely have a member of the majority actually offering a discharge petition.
And it is members of the majority.
That was a tool of the minority.
Exactly.
And it was never successful.
And it says everything you need to know about this extraordinary moment. And speaking of the president and healthcare, it fits into this broader discussion about affordability. I want to play what we heard from President Trump on this issue this week and get everyone's reaction on the other side.
You can give up certain products. You can give up pencils. Because under the China policy, every child can get 37 pencils. They only need 1 or 2. They don't need that many. But you always need steel. You don't need $37 for your daughter. 2 or 3 is nice, but you don't need $37. So we're doing things right. We're running this country right.
Malik, what do you make of that messaging? We don't need $37. 2 is fine.
Okay, so you clearly weren't going to make this easy for me.
He did go back there, Malik. He went back there.
This is Donald Trump kind of doing his riff sort of thing. And Donald Trump should know, and I was not here, but many of us during the Biden administration, we were hitting Biden over and over again on the economy, whether it was immigration or the economy, and Donald Trump. My guy, I support you, but he's making the exact same mistakes that the Biden administration made, because you can't tell people how to feel. It doesn't matter what the macroeconomics are. It doesn't matter what the stock market is doing. It doesn't matter any of that. It matters how people feel. And if they're paying more, the gas prices are down for sure, but if they're paying more for anything, whether it's due to Donald Trump or not, you are the president of the United States, and they're not going to go back and blame Joe Biden.
Is he right? Is this a parallel strategy that we saw during the Biden administration?
I think there's some truth to that. I do think that. Yeah,
here?
Joe continually said, we have a great economy. It's working. Yeah. Things will get better. It didn't happen in time for the elections. And I teased with you just a little bit. He actually went back there. I mean, it's months ago that he was talking about you can have $1 or $2. I mean, the reality is this is not a let them eat cake moment, except let them eat pretzels.
Right.
Cake would be too generous.
Daniela, pick up on that point as it relates to the midterms, because here we have in these off-year elections, Democrats running on affordability and having big wins in New Jersey, Virginia, and now the mayor's race in Miami. A Democrat hasn't won the mayor's race in Miami in 30 years, all on affordability.
It's working. That's what it's telling me. I mean, I covered those races. I'm talking to battleground district congressmen, women who are aware of what they're going to face in just a few months. They're going back to their districts. Americans don't feel better. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing with Republicans taking charge, because the biggest issue right now is these tax credits. This is real change that leadership can do to help Americans. And what we're seeing, what we're going to see in just a couple of days on the House floor is nothing done about it. This amendment vote might happen. It's unclear at this moment. It's unclear if they'll be able to implement it, especially considering what happened in the Senate, which Mel talked about.
Yeah, exactly. There was a big setback this week, I think, in addition to kind of this debate over health care, over redistricting in Indiana. The Republicans, the Senate Republicans, did not comply with what President Trump wanted. They voted against a redistricting plan. How big of a setback and a blow is that to the administration?
So I'll say this. I was actually talking to a number of Republicans in Indiana, in the State House and elsewhere, and one of my good friends, Pete Seat out of Indiana, he talked about himself that this wasn't about Donald Trump. This was about principle. And for many people just like me and many others who support this idea of small government conservatism, that states' rights and this, the federal government shouldn't usurp states' authority. This was what the fight was about, because what Donald Trump was saying to them is that I'm going to threaten you, bully you to do exactly what I want you to do, irrespective of what your state actually wants.
We should say we're going to talk to one of those Senate Republicans coming up in the show, but Congressman Crowley, last point to you. This is the counterpoint. Look, this is about principle. From the perspective of who's going to win, it's about the math. What does this math now mean in terms of this race to redistrict each other?
Well, this arms race really started by the president in Texas, took off. The California response was to say, if Texas goes forward, we will go forward. All putting it still on Texas. Now it's leaching out into other states as well. This makes it more difficult for the president in terms of getting those numbers. But what I will say is this. This harkens back to Georgia at the end of his first term, when he said to the Secretary of State, "Find me 11,780 votes," and they stood up to him. And it's because they're more distant. They're not here in Washington. They don't know him. He don't know them. Yeah. As opposed to here, he knows the members.
That's what I heard.
That complies with
And he wasn't nice about it either.
Interesting. All right, big difference between D.C. Republicans and the rest of the country is what you are saying. Thank you so much. Great conversation, Daniela, Joe, and Malik. Really appreciate it. Coming up, we're digging deeper into the healthcare dilemma, roiling both parties in Congress. Democratic Senator John Fetterman will join us in just a few moments. Plus, House Oversight Committee Democrats release more Epstein documents, this time containing never-before-seen photographs of President Trump and other powerful people mingling with the convicted sex offender. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Joining me now is Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman. Senator Fetterman, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
No, well, thank you for having me on.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about the big issue this week, health care. Do you think at this point that Congress will be able to prevent premiums from skyrocketing at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, honestly. I mean, both of those proposals that were put up in the Senate on Thursday, they were essentially designed to fail. I mean, everybody knew that they were going to fail because they were there was no discussions, and it's all assumed that that's where it's going to go. They knew that they were going to have 2 or 3 other Republicans voting for our proposal as well, too. And I knew we would have no Democrats voting for the Republican version. And I've been pushing, and I'm trying to encourage people, like, if you really want to deliver, affordability for health care premiums right now, and we essentially have 3 days next week to do this, and just do a clean 1-year extension of the Obama tax situation. That's easy, and that's something that we all understand that we'd be voting on, and that doesn't require the Republicans to die on the "oh, we love Obamacare" hill, and that for us here as the Democrats, we would have gladly reopened our government just for something like that, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now if they extended this now.
To your point, Senator, that you believe both bills were designed to fail, do you think that Democratic leadership should have offered more concessions to Republicans to get their bill over the finish line?
I'm saying that if the Republicans are genuinely scared for their own election, then they would take a clean 1-year extension. That's the cheapest way that they're going to get. They're going to be able to get this solved right now. And for me, I know we as Democrats, we wanted to have health care for everything after the 43 days of the shutdown. We could have had this vote on Thursday, and it didn't require it to plunge our country into that kinds of chaos and put us in that situation. If you really want a solution right now, a clean 1-year extension could do that, and that would give Congress an entire year to do the kinds of appropriate kinds of negotiations and make the kinds of changes to make it more durable. But, you really couldn't get a wall painted, in 3 days, there in the Senate, for something this complicated. This is the one easy and the most elegant way to do that could, I think, effectively could meet both parties. And if the Republicans aren't interested in that, then it's essentially saying, we're okay with these things going to expire. And if the Democrats aren't serious, and I do think that they could and should be, then that means, do we really want to deliver this kinds of affordability, or do we just doing this to make a political point and using the whole thing as theater and using it as a weaponized for 2026 election?
Well, Senator, some Republicans say they don't want to see any extension. Do you think you could get enough votes for a 1-year extension for it to pass?
I'm saying we got four with 3 years. And for 1 year, we need to hit 60. It doesn't matter if it hits 59, it still won't pass. It has to hit 60. And I'd say that's the cleanest, elegant way. When you have essentially 3 days to do that, that's the one way to do that. That could meet our core responsibility if we need to deliver those kinds of tax credits. That's the only way to do that with the amount of time that we have left right now.
If there is no deal, if these ACA subsidies do expire, Senator, what do you think the message should be from Democrats heading into the midterms?
Well, I mean, the message would be, well, we voted for health care, yeah. But if you're only willing to put up 3 years knowing that it's not going to pass, it's like, to me, like I would rather have I'd like to talk to the 400,000 Pennsylvanians that need these kinds of tax subsidies. I'd like to say, yeah, we got 1 year, and I'm going to fight like hell up the upcoming year that we're going to make sure to extend those things beyond 2026. Because right now with 3 days, be honest. I would say be honest that this is not something that you can have these kinds of small kinds of changes and pass it right now. We got four votes with 3 years. We need enough to hit to 60. That's math. It doesn't matter if it's 59, doesn't matter if it's 57. It means it has to be 60. That's the only chance that we can pass through this. And I think another thing's interesting. President Trump isn't, he's not putting input on a lot of this thing. When he feels strongly about something, we all know that he's made very clear about those things. He's saying, you guys find a way forward. I assume that. And then I am just putting that's the quickest, easiest, elegant, and the one that delivers, really the core responsibility to deliver those kinds of benefits for the tens of millions of Americans that are going to rely on that.
Senator, to follow up with you, do you think President Trump needs to get involved in order for there to be any type of deal struck here? Would you encourage him to get involved?
All I'm saying, I've pushed this. I pushed this not to the White House directly, but I have been pitching this. It's like, look, guys, I'm not going to argue the small points. If you're concerned about affordability on healthcare, it's like, hey, this is the easiest way to do this. And now that's where I think it's entirely appropriate. 3 years was not going to pass. And that thing that they put together on Thursday, not one single vote. There's no path on that. So I'm saying it's like, let's, if we were willing to take this, I'm sure, to reopen our government just in a couple of weeks ago, we would not even be having this conversation right now if they had done that back then. So with 3 days left, are you really serious? Are you really concerned about the impact this would have in 2026? You will figure out how really concerned you are, or on the flip side, are really concerned about delivering those kinds of health care benefits, or we just want to weaponize it for 2026.
Senator, what is your message to Pennsylvanians who are watching this right now, who are terrified that their premiums are going to go up, and they lay the blame at the feet of every elected official?
I would say to them, we're fighting for that. I'm fighting. I'm hoping. It's like empty show votes aren't going to deliver those things you need for you. I'll be very honest and straightforward. It's like the one thing that could deliver those kinds of things that you need needs to be the one that passed, and the one that everyone else can sign off on that thing. And I'm saying that's the quickest and the easiest solution. What's other one? Well, there's been multiple ones, and it hasn't gone anywhere. It got remotely close on passing. It's a math problem. It's a math problem. What's the thing that can do all those things? And I could talk to those people and say, we delivered for you, and for 2026, you don't have to worry about this right now. And then I will fight like hell to fight for those kinds of, and extending those for 27, 28, and perhaps even make them more permanent right now. But we're going to have to negotiate with our colleagues on the other side. That's the essence of democracy in the Senate and in Congress.
All right, Senator John Fetterman, thank you so much for joining us at this really pivotal moment in this debate over health care. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, ahead of next week's deadline for the Justice Department hand over the Epstein files to Congress, House Democrats just released more photos showing Epstein with high-profile people and politicians. Stay with us on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We've got new developments today surrounding the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released 19 more photos from Epstein's estate today. They come from a batch of about 95,000 documents the committee obtained last night. They include images of a younger Donald Trump with Epstein, posing with women whose identities have been protected by the House Democrats. Other photos include conservative commentator and Trump confidant Steve Bannon with Epstein, as well as filmmaker Woody Allen. Former President Bill Clinton can also be seen posing with a group that includes Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. We should be clear, none of the photos appear to demonstrate any criminal activity, but they do show more evidence of the relationship Epstein had with many powerful men. Republicans in the White House accusing Democrats of cherry-picking these photos from troves of thousands. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins me now, along with NBC News national law enforcement correspondent Tom Winter. Thanks to both of you for being here. Ryan, let me start with you. These are 19 photos out of about 95,000 photos the House Oversight Committee has in its possession. Are Democrats explaining why they released 19? And again, Republicans say they're just cherry picking.
Well, part of the reason that they've only released these photos, and we should point out that they just in the last 5 minutes or so released another trove of about 70 more photos. These also contain pictures of Epstein with various individuals and also pictures of his property, similar to what they released a week or so ago, is because they're still going through them. They have some 95,000 photos that they received from the estate overnight, and they're plowing through them each one by one to determine what is relevant and what is not. The long-term goal here is to make everything public, but before they do that, they have to go through a very careful process to make sure that there isn't anything that could interrupt an investigation or that could reveal the identity of a survivor or victim that doesn't want their identity to be revealed. So it is a painstaking process, and when they get information that they feel they can release safely that is of interest to the public, that's what they're doing. They're releasing it.
Tom, let me head over to you because, of course, all of this comes ahead of the next Friday's deadline for the Justice Department to release all of the Epstein files. What's the status of that? Are you anticipating that they will, in fact, move forward with that?
You know, Kristen, we have gotten no guidance whatsoever, and I'm including in that my capable and friendly colleagues that sit next to you in Washington, D.C., that have been talking to the Justice Department headquarters. We just have no sense from them whether or not they're going to hit that deadline. There are several carve-outs that may or may not be relevant here. One was the first one about grand jury material. Well, now the grand jury judges who oversaw that material, or at least the district court judges that oversaw that material, have signed off on that, on those documents and those pieces of evidence being released as long as the proper redactions are done. There's a lot of indication that some of that redaction work has already occurred, did occur back in the spring. So we'll have to see where that goes. That's going to be case file information, a lot of which we probably already know. Do not anticipate any information to come out based on our reporting that has to do with any potential additional charges against any other individual. So I want to be clear about that. And the FBI and the Justice Department has already told you so in their memo back in July. The other carve-out is about the ongoing investigation component, and it happened just before Thanksgiving, so maybe some folks forgot, Kristen, but there was an additional inquiry that was ordered up. Trump suggested it. The Attorney General Pam Bondi said that she would ask Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, to look at some of the things that came up in the Epstein emails. That was received by the House Oversight Committee. So whether or not that thwarts the release of further documents, because the law does provide for documents to be withheld for an ongoing investigation.
Ryan, let me head back over to you. I know you said that there were more photos that were just released. What's the plan? Are you anticipating there's going to be a steady stream of photos and potentially more documents released in the coming days?
I think that's exactly how it's going to play out. The sources that I've talked to on the committee have said that this process could take weeks, it could take months, given the volume of content that they're dealing with. But the committee is also not working together. In other words, Republicans and Democrats are kind of working in parallel streams here. They're not necessarily working in a bipartisan fashion. So while this is the way Democrats have chose to release this information, there's a possibility that at any point Republicans could just drop the entire document, as they did before when we received email documents from the Epstein estate, and the Democrats had pushed out just certain select emails. So we're always on watch for Epstein information to be dropped from these committees. In addition to, of course, these photos from the estate, of course, Kristen, we're still waiting for the information that they received from banks. We know that they have that in-house, and those documents have still not been released to the public.
And Tom, so far, nothing in these photos has proven to be criminal in nature. However, this is clearly going to be studied carefully by the committee, by potentially law enforcement officials. How do you think these photos will be received?
Potentially, from a law enforcement perspective, these images probably provide little to no value. I do think it speaks, based on all of our reporting from the testimony of the victims, the witnesses that's come out at trial, as well as the ones we've spoken to here on NBC News, on this program and others. It does speak to the fact that, imagine if you're a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl who was involved in being recruited, then sexually assaulted at the Epstein home in Florida, and then you're looking around and you're seeing photo after photo of the person who did this with a former president of the United States and very well-known businessmen. What would that sense that you would get if you were to go to law enforcement or speak out? That may be a potential problem, and I think that speaks to the power that Epstein projected. How much power he actually had, I think, is a big question.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. All right, Ryan and Tom, thank you both so much. Really appreciate the great reporting. Coming up after the break, a rare rebuke from Republicans in a deep red state as Indiana lawmakers defy President Trump's redistricting campaign. One of those state senators who spoke out against the president joins me next. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to that stunning news that broke while we were on the air yesterday. Republicans failed efforts to redraw Indiana's congressional map. The state's GOP-controlled Senate rejected a proposed map that would have dismantled Indiana's 2 Democrat-controlled districts. The vote coming despite mounting pressure from President Trump, who threatened primary challenges to any Republican who voted against redistricting. It is also a major setback for Republicans in the nationwide redistricting fight, which has already seen 4 states adopt new maps and efforts to redraw new maps underway in 3 others. Joining me now is one of the Indiana Senate Republicans who voted against the new congressional map, Mike Bohacek. Thank you so much for joining me, State Senator. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for the time.
So take me back to that vote yesterday. You and your Republican colleagues faced a lot of pressure from President Trump. The vice president even traveled to your state to talk to all of you about this vote. How and why did your colleagues decide to vote against this redistricting campaign?
You know, we all had, I think, different reasons. Probably a big reason was just our constituency base didn't want it. And after they saw the maps and they saw how it was going to impact their districts and their representation, there was a pretty big outcry from I know my constituency was very displeased about it. I have my own personal reasons why I voted against it as well, as in addition to it just being very bad policy.
What were those personal reasons, State Senator Bohacek?
Right after Thanksgiving, I was sitting with my daughter. We were watching TV, and some of the comments that the president made regarding a political adversary, and he used a slur, to refer to handicapped people. And I have a daughter who has Down syndrome, so I took it very personally. And this isn't the first time this slur has been used. We know that by not only his own administration, but even members of his cabinet this past summer. And it just finally just hit a chord. We see how he speaks to the media, and that's up to certainly you folks to deal with that. But this was a chance for me to have my voice heard on this one particular issue.
It is extraordinary, State Senator, because many Republicans have been over time swayed by President Trump. for various reasons. They're afraid of getting primaried. They're afraid about the political pressure. They're afraid about just the pressure from within their own party. Are you concerned that there will be some type of retribution campaign, that you will be primaried, for example, the next time you're up for
so
re-election?
I just got through my election last year, so my primary season is over with. But for some of my colleagues that voted against this, yeah, there's a real risk that they could get primaried, and certainly the president and his supporters have sufficient and significant resources behind them to make that a very difficult process. But it's still not going to sway some of these folks because, look, they are traditional Republicans. They believe what they believe. They listen to their constituents. And they're not going to change their minds, and you're not going to bully them. You're not going to bribe or coerce them. It's just not how it is in Indiana. We're just a different group. And even my colleagues on the other side of the aisle stand just as firmly in their position to move forward with the redistricting. So, Indiana Republicans, we're a pretty stubborn breed.
What do you say to Republicans who may make the argument, this is about holding on to the House, and Indiana Republicans may have made it just a little bit more difficult for Republicans to hold on to the House? How do you respond to that line of argument?
Well, if you look at the maps, there's no guarantee of 9-0. I looked at one of the districts that actually would impact my own voting, and that district is not a guarantee our win. It's not. So there was no guarantee of a 9-0, and this is just one of those times that policy has to win. And this is bad policy. It's not something I want to do every 2 years, because that's what this could turn into. And it does not need to be that. We need to be more deliberative. And with something that's this consequential, it's very important that we are the deliberative body that makes sure that good policy moves forward. Because like I've told others, your time in the Senate is very, very small. And once you're gone, you're forgotten. So you can't make this your identity, but bad policy stays forever.
Let me finally get you to respond to your Republican governor. This is what he had to say yesterday after the vote. He released a statement saying, quote, "I am very disappointed that a small group of misguided state senators have partnered with Democrats to reject this opportunity to protect Hoosiers with fair maps and to reject the leadership of President Trump. Ultimately, decisions like this carry political consequences. I will be working with the president to challenge these people who do not represent the best interests of Hoosiers." Have you spoken to the governor since the vote? Has your relationship with him been damaged?
I have not spoken with them about this specifically. They did call me and ask me if I would support the redistricting, which I honestly told them I would not. But the same governor also used his own political funds this past spring during the session to try to push forth a property tax plan that was very misguided and would have resulted in extreme financial hardships for our municipalities and our schools, which we ultimately were able to work through a better solution. He used his own campaign dollars for that. And if he's going to use his own campaign dollars to punish senators, because this vote is not coming back, you're just going to do that to punish them to get your pound of flesh. Why don't you invest those dollars, recruit a good candidate for the two Democrat districts that are in question, and push your money behind them and win this seat fairly, as opposed to try to punish my colleagues. But the governor could do what the governor wants to do, and let's be honest, he has political capital that he's lost within the chamber.
All right. Just fascinating to hear from you, State Senator Mike Bohacek. We really appreciate your perspective today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We wish you a very happy holiday season. I now want to turn to NBC News national political reporter Ben Camisar, who joins me. That is so fascinating to hear from State Senator Bohacek. He took us behind the scenes a little bit to explain his thinking, some of which was personal, some of which he said there was no guarantee. What do you make of the vote yesterday, and what are the implications of the fact that this was to some extent a rebuke of President Trump?
Yeah, I think we sit here in Washington, D.C., and President Trump's gravitational pull on Republicans is so big, right? And I think we realize now that as we go further away from Washington, D.C., that gravitational pull doesn't look the same. You heard from the state senator. I mean, it was a fascinating conversation because, right, it was multifaceted. It was political. It was personal. These dynamics that you really wouldn't hear among Capitol Hill Republicans. And it just was a reminder that there are limitations right now to the president's gravitational pull on his party.
It's a really great point, and here he is approaching the first year of his second term in office, and it does raise the question about whether his grip is loosening on the party overall. And of course, he sent the vice president to make the case for this redistricting push. Do you get the sense that there was a behind-the-scenes wrangling effort going on that may have led to this defeat on the other side that may not have been as public?
There were kind of both, right? We saw the carrots and the stick from the Trump administration, from the president's allies, from the Heritage Foundation, right? We saw all of that, but all politics is local. There was a local group. There was a lot of people who were pushing against this on the smaller side. Like, one of the big salient arguments was the one that the senator mentioned, that 9-0 is not a guarantee, and there's always this concern of, if you're redrawing the lines, are you going to accidentally make some districts a little more vulnerable than you wanted them to be in the first place? So I think the law of unintended consequences seems to be a piece of this too, and that resonates more locally than it does nationally.
Yeah, and I guess the question, Ben, is we are thinking about the math overall very quickly. Does this zero everything out? Is everything now at an even point?
It's probably not going to zero everything out, and we still need to see what's going to happen in other states. Republicans still are likely to have a little bit of an edge, but it's not the edge that they were hoping for, months ago.
All right. Ben Camisar, thank you so much. Great to see you. Really appreciate it. And still to come, brand new NBC reporting on tensions and turmoil under Secretary Kristi Noem's leadership at the Department of Homeland Security. We'll delve into all of it. Keep it right here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Turning now to what appears to be turmoil and rising tensions within the Department of Homeland Security. Pressure from the White House to ramp up deportations has sparked tensions at the DHS, prompting finger-pointing within the agency, with Secretary Noem and her top advisor blaming subordinates for not meeting arrest quotas. That's according to two DHS officials with direct knowledge of the matter. Joining me now is NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, who had that exclusive reporting. Congratulations. You're always breaking news here, Julia. So thank you for being here. Take us inside your reporting. What are you learning?
So this is fascinating. What it comes down to is Noem, with her senior advisor, Corey Lewandowski, who was supposed to be there temporarily, but is still there. They have been running a lot of the show inside DHS, which includes approving contracts. And what we understand is that the White House wants to move a lot faster to expand detention for immigration, because they think that would really boost these arrest numbers and be able to make at least more good on President Trump's promise for mass deportations, even though they likely won't get to 1 million by the end of his first year. But what's been happening internally is that Noem and Lewandowski have been pointing fingers as they felt that pressure, especially on the heads of certain agencies like Customs and Border Protection. Even though they're at record low numbers on the border, the commissioner of CBP, Rodney Scott, who has always been a Trump loyalist, now believes and has been told that his emails are being monitored by Lewandowski, because there's a sense that he might be undermining them to the White House. We also know Todd Lyons, the head of ICE, has threatened to quit on multiple occasions under this pressure to ramp up numbers, basically saying the reason we haven't been able to expand detention space has nothing to do with him as acting director, but more to do with Lewandowski and Noem's roles really having this outsized influence over the contracting process. So it sounds like a lot of finger pointing, gossip, drama within DHS. But what it comes down to is an administration really at odds with itself over whether or not it can come through on President Trump's key campaign promise, and the leadership style of Noem, and whether or not the White House continues to keep faith in her as the leader of DHS.
It's just fascinating reporting. And just very quickly, you have new reporting as well on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case. What can you tell us there? What's the status, Julia?
That's right. So exactly 24 hours ago, Kilmar Abrego Garcia walked out of ICE detention in Pennsylvania. He was picked up. He has conditions for his release. He has to stay with his brother, not with his family. He has to apply for jobs. He has to try to work, very specific conditions. But this is all because a federal judge overseeing his case said, look, the Department of Homeland Security has tried so many times times to send him to other countries. That hasn't worked out. They cannot detain him indefinitely. And what his legal team wants is a chance for him to have due process while his criminal case plays out. Because if he's not in the country to defend himself and he gets deported, that's the end of his story, and he never gets the due process that this whole thing was about in the first place.
Wow. Okay. Well, so many twists and turns with that case. You've been on top of all of them. Julia, thank you so much. Hope we have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Appreciate your being here. And we will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll have exclusive interviews with Senators Rand Paul and Raphael Warnock. Plus, Steve Kornacki will join us with brand new NBC News Decision Desk polling. Do not miss it. There's much more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.